wife. She's there, and then on the 26th we go to the beach, to the Mante.
Been studying backsliding all this year, so I forgot the concept.
Okay.
Buenas tardes. ¿Cómo están? Mucho gusto verlos acá. Vamos a disciplinar a los académicos en la ala izquierda. Buenas tardes. Tenemos el honor de tener a un muy buen académico el día de hoy. La fecha viene como regalo de Navidad.
I don't know.
Oscar Mazzoleni está en Chile y nosotros hemos querido invitarlo porque ha desarrollado temas muy interesantes desde el punto de vista de la democracia, el populismo. Ya les voy a leer su CV y gracias al fondo de iniciación también lo podemos tener aquí entre nosotros y tener una buena discusión. Dada la fecha, también lo vamos a transmitir por nuestro canal de YouTube, después lo van a poder ver con tranquilidad, pero ustedes van a ser quienes estén presencialmente con él y él nunca lo va a olvidar. This presentation is going to be in English because he is more fluent in English. He understands Spanish, so en la parte de las preguntas, if you want, yo voy a hacer un Spanglish horrible, ¿ya? Entonces, en la parte de las preguntas, si quieren preguntar en español, yo puedo hacer la traducción. I can do the translation after for the questions part. And so here we are. Oscar Mazzoleni es profesor titular del Instituto de Estudios Políticos de la Universidad de Laussane, Suiza. Él es profesor de Ciencia Política y Sociología Política de la Universidad de Laussane. ¿Está bien pronunciado? Laussane.
Lausanne.
Okay, perfect.
French.
No, not my strongest language. Sus líneas de investigación comprenden el estudio del nacionalismo, el populismo, regionalismo, partido y política, Suiza en perspectiva comparada. Entre sus últimas publicaciones sobresalen Territory and Democratic Politics, A Critical Introduction, es un libro del 2024. Otra publicación, National Populism and Borders, de Politicization of Cross-Border Mobilization in Europe. Also a book on 2023, Sovereignism and Populism, Citizen Voters and Parties in Western European Democracy. Also a book, 2022. I'm impressed. Yeah, 3 books in a row. That is very impressive. Además, su trabajo ha sido publicado en diversas revistas académicas, destacando European Politics and Society, Government and Opposition, Political Studies, Party Politics, Swiss Political Scientist Review, among others. Aprovecho también de destacar la presencia de nuestro decano, Leonardo Letelier, y el vicedecano, Ariel Ramírez, que les voy a dar la palabra, si es que no. Bueno, ok. pues después en las partes de las preguntas y respuestas, y también al Departamento de Sociología de la Facultad de Ciencias Sociales de la Universidad de Chile, que en conjunto hemos organizado esta conferencia. Okay. Oscar.
So, gracias. I'm really sorry I cannot speak Spanish. I have to learn it, of course. It's my fault. I'm really happy to be here, happy to be invited to discuss with you and to share with you some result also of my research of the last years on the topic that you mentioned, that I mentioned here in the title, so the rise of the European radical right in connection with the economic dimensions. So the question is a bit rhetoric because, of course, the answer is yes, it matters. Economics matters, of course. But it's important to discuss this aspect in an in-depth way. So, as you probably know, Europe is one of the main landscape, main context in which radical right parties over all the world have a relevant success, electoral success, political success. Many examples you can find currently 7 European countries, so for members of the European Union, Croatia, Czech Republic, Finland, and so on, Italy, Netherlands, and Slovakia, have a radical right parties in the government. With many other cases, we have external support of this kind of parties. So radical right has an increasing impact, has an impact also because 2 of the main countries in which we experience authoritarian regime in the 20th century, in the first part of the 20th century, as Italy, Germany, nowadays have a strong radical right parties too, and one in this case in Italy, also the main party in the government. So the main government party came from, is a radical right party. And of course, if you look at the European elections in June 2024, this kind of parties, this family of parties, won at least 25% of seats in the parliament. So that's here. Just I'm sorry, it's in French because I teach in a French university sometimes. And here you find the percentage of support by radical right parties, but sometimes scholars or journalists say extreme right parties, and considering this, the countries, the 27 countries in which you have a European election. So look, the percentage is come from, so they begin in some countries less than 10%, then you arrive at 40%, 48% in Hungary, especially in Hungary, of course, with the Fidesz, and not only Fidesz party by Orban. So here you have what is important to see and to say is almost all countries or European countries nowadays as a relevant or very strong radical right party. This trend is not completely new, but of course is growing in the last 10, 15 years. So the question is also, if you look at this as a scholar, from a scientific point of view, is a question of definition. Of course, you can include everything with everything. The concepts are not just secondary element in the discussion. There are several definitions of what radical right politics or ideology is. Radical right parties' ideology deals with different values, different combinations: conservatism, authoritarianism, nationalism, nativism, neoliberalism, and so on. There is no one way to define that. This depends a lot of the context, depends of the tradition of the country, and of course the role and the capacity of the party to interpret this kind of legacy within the country, and the political opportunities in the political competition. So the question is, of course, try to define a kind of concept or a definition able to capture, to understand to some extent this kind of family, because we observe a kind of convergences, similarities of these parties despite differences. And we observe, according to many scholars, this appeal to native community against elites, against immigration, also undermining minorities. So there is a kind of communalities, and the many scholars connect this with the concept of populism. And the populism, of course, is again another concept, very complicated, with many definitions. But this is the idea of the contrast between Manichaean contrast between the people undermine, the people of people they are under threats, and against, and this the responsibility of this situation are some elites, some enemies, external enemies. This kind of opposition, Manichaean opposition, you can find both in the many aspects of the radical right ideology, for conservatism, authoritarian nationalism, nativism, all these concepts as an opponent, as enemy. So conservatism, progressivism, authoritarianism, libertarianism, nationalism, cosmopolitanism, etc. So we have this kind of opposition, a very strong opposition, and the creation of the enemy. So in this sense, there are many, of course, definitions connected with that of populism. That is not time here for my presentation. We can discuss later about what is populism in different definitions. What's important here, if I, is to come to the fact that is that the cultural backlash. So this is important to say that because we insist in the literature, because we insist as a scholar about nativism, about nationalism, about immigration, we emphasize usually cultural dimension of the explanation of the support of this party. So we observe that the people are concerned by cultural changes, by immigration flow, and you consider that's a cultural threat first, less than economic one. In this sense, many scholars said, yeah, finally, it's not a question, it's not a matter of economics, it's a matter of cultural threat, cultural problem. Cultural, because the question of the nation is a natural belonging of the people. There are too many people coming here in the country, so we destroy the nation. We destroy the purity of the cultural belonging, and so on. This is first of all a problem of a cultural problem, and of course there are many scholars saying yes, this is also connected with the fact that within this party family, so this kind of party, there are some parties much more concerned by the welfare state, social subsidies, they support more state intervention, and others are much more neoliberal, cutting taxes, and so in this sense, more concerned by a radical economic right-wing vision. And this is the fact that many scholars say, no, it's not a question of economics. It's much more, we stay on the cultural because this is a common aspect of these parties, a cultural dimension. But at the same time, so there are another example, plenty of examples. So the fact, for instance, as an important comparative studies on the European elections in the past, but by Stockemer, he say the impact of economic crisis finally do not really change the support, the level of support of this party by citizens, by the voters. So finally, if you control many aspects, many factors, finally the economic crisis doesn't matter a lot. So it's much more other aspects. So there are many examples of this kind of approach, saying that finally the explanatory impact of economics is not so relevant. But then there is an opposite. There is many other scholars that say, no, please look differently the question of economics. Economy is not just economic crisis, it's not just about state interventions versus reducing taxes. It's much more complex. And it embraces many other aspects of the reality. And look, and there are many, an increasing amount of now scholarship is not only political scientists, political sociology, but economists also working in this kind of field, trying to explain the rise of these parties in Europe. And they say, okay, look the impact of the economic transformation, the financial shocks, but also the income inequality. And many studies now show this kind of dimension of factors have an impact on the rise of these parties. So the question of the income inequality is also connected with spatial, so the regional or local inequalities, not just the individuals or group, but also the place where you live. And depending where you live, it's also important to explain some differences between the the relevance and the support of these parties. So the fact that you live in declining industrial place, industrial region where you are on decline sectors, you are under pressure of the international competition, you live in a rural area with less economic and state support, that can increase the probability you vote for this kind of parties. And then you have a new trend, this third dimension, the third stream of the literature, insisting on the socioeconomic policies, saying it is not just about a question of state intervention versus more market or pro-market economy. It's much more on the welfare state and the welfare state chauvinism, for instance. You mix, so you ask for money for state intervention, the welfare state intervention, social subsidies for unemployment people, but only for native people. So people from here, so belonging to the community, the true community. In this sense, there is a new trend of literature to say, okay, it's not a question of left wing in a classic way, it's more complex. Combining some aspect of left-wing economics, more state, and pro-market. And this literature is also connected with this kind of, what I say later, the question of the value and the moral dimensions. Look, if you are supporter of pro-market, of course you say everyone should reduce taxes for everyone. But you can be, as in France, for instance, the Rassemblement National by Marine Le Pen, you can say, we want to increase welfare state support for our people, for native, for French people, and at the same time, reducing tax for small business. And this, what you can see, is it left, is it right? It's you reduce taxes and you increase welfare. So this kind of aspect create a kind of new questions, new research questions, within the scholarship, try to how you can deal with that, because it is both left and right. And there is this literature connected with moral and value dimension. This is exactly the topic on which I want to talk, because it's my it's my research. In this sense, I work on this specific aspect. But look, just to remember, you have two big vision of this kind of stuff. There is scholars, they say, there is clearly two dimensions. There is economics on the one side and cultural on the other side. Two aspects should be considered separately. It's two dichotomic. There are cultural variable, economic variable. And this is the usual way. So the problem is, do you really, for instance, the perception of the economic problems, is this an economic dimension, just or that? Or when you talk about perception, you introduce a cultural dimension, because social representation, moral vision of society, and then you introduce a cultural dimensions. It's a mix of. And this is the second alternative approach is they consider this a priori separation between the cultural and the economic a matter of, is artificial, as a question artificial way. Just to write a good paper in academic journal, say, okay, I divided many factors, I have a good model of regression analysis, that's a culture, that's economics, and then fixed. But the reality maybe is a bit more complex. Is this a new look at the example? For instance, comparative studies of Weigrid and Hall argue lower level of subjective status combining both cultural and economic dimension is strongly associated with radical right in Europe, radical right support in Europe. So it's because subjective status, what is subjective? I feel myself in decline, but not necessarily because I have less money, but because I see the situation, my sentiment, my feeling is we are in crisis, we are in situation, my family can fail within this context. So uncertainty is not just about the money that I have in my pocket, but also a feeling. And this feeling is not just a matter of economics. It's a matter of belief. It's a matter of something moral also, values. We need in our society strong stability. because we need to conserve our values, and everything is uncertain, is a problem. So if you have another perspective and you have another vision of the society, so the society is a moving society, movement society, we need to move everywhere, there's a cosmopolitan view, maybe some uncertainty is normal. It's not perceived as a danger, a threat. So this literature work on this. And in this sense, with a colleague of mine and others, we developed this concept of economic populism. Economic populism is, so the question of, when you look at populism, you look at two different opposition, Manichaean opposition between the good people and the bad elites and the bad enemies, or for the enemies, immigrant and so on. But the question is, this economic populism, so it's a matter of vision of society. It's a matter of values. We see, we consider, we judge society as bad at the moment. And this is not just economics. It's a mix of beliefs, values about society should be, is and should be. And we developed this concept of economic populism and we distinguish different dimensions. The first dimension is the real public embody an economic community as an economic community. So people that share virtues and destiny, especially in terms of prosperity. So the people belonging of the people, the good people, should have the same prosperity opportunity, should have the same values, the same commonality. So both in terms of economy, material, but also symbolic, but also cultural, of course. And to some extent, these people are under threat. So they are in decline in terms of economic prosperity in a material way, but also they feel in decline. So the people is in danger, the good people. But it's not the people, danger is the sovereignty necessary. It's not about the capacity to have a power of the vicinity in general, but it's in the economic way. So economic prosperity isn't in danger. And it is this aspect, and there are some people, they are responsible of that. People, or so enemies, not the people, because the people is always true, the truth entity. So the people of prosperity is ignored, for instance, because the elite doesn't care about that. Do not care about that, elites. And the same, of course, they can be betrayed by the elite. And the aspect is, you have to support, in the sense of, as a voter, you have to support a radical right vision of the society with this kind of vision, because you have to restore, reinstall, recreate the condition of the prosperity of the people. So this kind of argument is connected with two concepts, in this sense. One is the concept of producerism, and the second in the sovereignty. And the sovereignty, of course, is based on the idea that sovereignty is the power, this absolute power on our destiny, our fate. So the idea that we have to control our economy, we have to control the condition in which we live, and we are against uncertainty and the foreign powers, for instance, if you look at the globalization. And this sense, two concepts. And these two concepts are at the center of my further analysis that I present today. Of course, if I have a lot of time, I can go very, very, very fast. So there is a literature not only in Europe, but first of all in US. In US, there is a literature trying to use this concept of producerism to understand the radical right legacy of populism in US since the 19th century by now. So there's books as The Cousin, Abromate, and others say, if you want to understand the tradition from the 19th century by Trump, you have to put at the center the concept of producerism. And we test some of this aspect also in Europe with different studies. And this is the idea that the opposition, the Manichaean opposition between the people and the enemies is not based on just the prosperity and the betrayal of prosperity. So the people are the producers. The people contribute to the prosperity of our country. Of course, they have contributed in the past, and they has to benefit of this prosperity, the region of the country. So there are some parasites. So the parasite they try to destroy, to stone this prosperity. So the true people is defined by virtuous community of art workers, makers. So the people that work hard, they believe in a strong work ethic, and they think there is enemies. They do not believe on that. They just are here as elite, corrupted elite. They took money from the people. They are immigrants. They took money from us, and they are the expression of the underserving enemies. They are parasites. So this vision of society is not about only on the radical right, please. Could be also the left. It's not just about Europe. It's not everywhere in the world. This vision, of course, is connected with the values, the work. But you can think is a good to work, but not necessary to have enemies that you consider as some other actors that you consider enemies. So this Manichaean vision is part of this economic populism. And here I have an empirical studies with survey analysis. I don't know if it's a good place here to discuss about in detail about that, but I really got too fast with that. So we, with a colleague of mine, a French colleague of mine, Julie Valdy at Sciences Po Paris, in 2021, we gathered an original survey with in different countries, so France, Germany, Italy, Switzerland, and United Kingdom, but also United States, and we tried to test this vision of the producerist. So the producerist values, to some extent, try to see if, to what extent they can contribute to explain the support of radical right. And it's here very, very fast. So it's about 2,000 people in each country, and so it's so we define producerist attitudes as a set of polarized moral judgment. In this sense, we distinguish people, we distinguish groups. We try to see if within the citizen, so among the citizen, there is different perception of social groups, professional groups, and if this perception is based on this opposition between the people they contribute to prosperity and other they undermine prosperity. So the people, they are producers and the other parasites. And we try to see, to test this, and I show you which kind of group we have. So here we define, we have a list of groups. We submit in a questionnaire. We have immigrants, people for social benefits, small business, entrepreneur, workers, politicians, CEO, rich people, public servants. And this, for all these people or group, we ask citizens in our questionnaire to what extent they consider contributors or more profiters of this situation. So they do not the opposite of the contributor of the prosperity of the country. So we test this questionnaire in all these countries, in the countries that I mentioned before, and we also add ask people to see how, if it's true, they agree or not agree, to what extent. Most people who are unsuccessful in life are just plain lazy. That's expression of the work ethic. You cannot expect anything from life without effort and sacrifice. So this is, we test work ethic, and we test also if there is a Manichaean vision about these groups of people. And finally, what we observe is effectively, it's everywhere in the countries where we test. This opposition works a lot. They work clearly on that. So in our model, of course, we try also to consider there are some sister dimension or close dimension as welfare chauvinism, maybe because you consider there are people they are not really good workers, so they profit for the welfare state, or they are people they do not. So we in this sense we distinguish all these aspects, and we try, so the welfare chauvinism, authoritarianism, globalization, and economic redistribution, we control all the aspects, and we try to see to what extent this producerist antagonism play a role in the explanation of voting for these parties. So we are concerned that it can be a kind of overlapping with this, and we control that. What is interesting here, very quickly, this is all the data set, all the countries together. What you can see here is so the dark line. So look, the CEO, rich people, politicians, immigrant, social benefit, all these entities or groups are problematic in this way, considered as parasites globally. And then you move on public servant also, and then you have small entrepreneur and workers. This is clear, the opposition. So clearly opposition. We can see also because the scale is from 1 to 7. So we really CEO, rich people, politicians, etc., are totally considered as parasites. This is a global vision, and then we observe that in all countries singularly. But I have some example to give you. For instance, Great Britain is the case of. So if you look, of course, you have a left, conservative, right-wing, producer mixed. So left, look the left. Left is also on the top, more than the radical right. So you can see the gray ball, and then you have also this. And then when you move down, social benefit is much more, and immigrant. Look, immigrant is at the lower level because it's the left. Immigrant considered it is much more contributors. And your social benefit, public servant is very different than the radical right, so we can see. But you have similarities with small entrepreneur and workers. That's the trend in all the countries together. But of course there is a kind of pooled data set. Of course there are differences within the countries, but not really between European countries, but European countries and US. So that's the case of Great Britain. The similar. You can see, I'm sorry for it's not very well done, but you can see the immigrant, the left wing, and you have the radical right again. Workers, small entrepreneur. We have the France is similar again. So this is a general trend that you can find also in the singular. Here you have United States. United States, you see, is very different. So in US, rich people are not considered parasites, but contributor of richness, of the prosperity of the countries, much more than the European countries. That's maybe confirm our expectation, but CEO, and so in the radical right, so within the radical right, the idea is no problem for millionaire. Well, probably it's taken for granted because support for Trump. But this is, you can see that is a bit different configuration. Small entrepreneurs and workers everywhere as proxies of the producers. So the real producers are the small entrepreneur and workers. And this is everywhere. And here, I'm sorry, it's a problem of vision, but we test this, and finally, we confirm, maybe you can discuss later about the details, but this model confirm we control on gender, on level of education. We include many other aspects. We control on the country level, so Germany, Italy, Swiss, UK, US. Here is French is the case that controlling all the reference categories, and then everywhere is controlled. But finally, this is an example, of course, of studies. The first study existing in the literature at the moment on this from the citizen point of view. So look at this. The question is, of course, if this works also in Latin America. That's another question, of course. We never test this. And we test this. This is a specific case for US. And also, it works very well. This was 21, so it's not now, it's a bit old. It was the support Trump versus Biden. And we have also the same, this is the controlling category was the radical right producerism. And again, it works with some differences between Europe. So that's important to see that we can reflect about the impact of economic dimensions over radical right you support. If you look social equalities, they seem very important, but we can also see other aspects. And here we test some aspect a bit less conventional, less mainstream, but we think this aspect should also to be considered when you look at the economic dimension, although they include cultural one, because work ethic is perfectly cultural. It's not about economics as such. It's not material, but it's embedded, it's in between. It's in between. You cannot separate clearly between work ethic and economy. It's in between. And this is also was the criticism by Max Weber against Karl Marx also. Please consider also this aspect. Ethic is not just about cultural separated from economics. And this aspect is also, yes, we can go in detail maybe later. And then we have the second concept is sovereignty and sovereignism in particular. So economic populism, to go back to economic populism, this is the idea of the people under threat, the prosperity of the people under threat, and the idea that the material well-being and prosperity is in decline. The establishment and the parasite are judged as responsible of this decline. But then we want to recover. The idea that in this sense, radical rights is not just about criticism. They're not just oppositional parties. They stay on the government. They want to govern, and they say, we have some concrete proposal. We need to restore, for instance, national sovereignty. Restore national sovereignty is not just a matter of political stuff. We want to decide in our parliament, the government should decide alone with all the power and not under pressure of foreign powers. We need to be sovereign in an economic way. So in terms of our prosperity. So for instance, protectionism. And the idea is here that we develop the concept of sovereignism in economic sovereignty, not because other concepts are not just necessarily synonymous, because if you look at protectionism is a very complex concept. It's very complicated. We can discuss about that from a political economic point of view, but current protectionism is very, very different than the protectionism one century ago, because one century ago, it was the idea, we close the country, we close the country, we have not export, import, we protect our country. Today is, we export what we want, but we want not to be import. That's interesting. Also, everyone want to protect their own national economy, but of course, against the others. And this is the idea, the sovereignism is about the control on our prosperity, and not necessarily just protectionism. It's about, for instance, we have the right to reduce, increase taxes, for instance. It's not necessarily about protectionism. So we control the power in this sense. And then we do the similar, I'm going very fast, we do similar analysis. So we have another question, the same questionnaire or different questionnaire, we have a similar data set. We try to test this within the citizen, within the electorate of these parties. And we connect this, of course, with globalization. Because, of course, when you talk about economic sovereignty, you talk about globalization first. You consider that globalization is a threat of economic sovereignty. And we test, so the question of the economic sovereignism in relation to the perception economic globalization. And then we have, of course, the main hypothesis. There are some scholars working on that. So the Steger is the professor in New Zealand at the moment, I think. He developed the concept of globalism. The globalism is sort of the vision of the society and the economy. They say if you open the borders from everywhere, you have an international competition, you increase prosperity. So the idea is the radical right stay against that. Anti-globalist is an anti-globalist vision. But finally, we can see later it's not totally this, but we have our hypothesis is the fact that people, they feel that the economic prosperity of the nation, of the people, is under threat. The people, they consider at the same time we need to recover our prosperity with more sovereignty. And the people, they consider globalization as a threat are more or less the same people. So there are strong commonalities. And then we test that in this analysis with a questionnaire. And we analyze, okay, an original survey, this is 2020, with France, Germany, Italy, Switzerland, and United States, in 2,000 people in each country. And then we try to operationalize these concepts with the specific items. So we can discuss a lot about, so economic populism, they include also the concept of producerism, of course, the idea that in this country one does not really care about people who work hard. That's the idea that, okay, people are to work hard, but no care, so the people who work hard are not considered. And then in our country, politicians don't really care about the people living standards, or the overall economic well-being of this country has declined compared to the past. So the idea is more different items there connected with this idea of the decline of the well-being, the prosperity of the people, and the people are workers, not considered, etc. So we try to capture this dimension. Economic sovereignism, so the idea that we have to come back the sovereignty in terms of regain control of the economic destiny, and then globalization. There are some items connected with their perception of globalization, some positive, some negative. So that's we test that, and the idea was to see to what extent these different dimensions, items are connected each other, and then we see that there are some groups connect. So we have a list of questions, we test that, and we separate them in these groups that I mentioned before. So there are the group of the economic populism, there are group of economic sovereigntism, and there are group of globalization perception. They go together, and then we test them together. And what here, this is the overall, just European countries, the European countries. Look, we consider different factors. We consider we control under women and men. We control about a level of education. We control about the cultural dimension of the immigrant as a problem in terms of a problem of opportunity in terms of culture. We have other variables: moral law and order, take rich, give power is redistribution, and finally, we have the impact. The globalism is negative because the direction of the items. But finally, we control again, and we find similar. We have a significant impact. And of course, I have, because I have 45 minutes, and the idea here again is look of the economic dimensions, very relevant economic dimension in explaining the rise of these parties in Europe. But we have to look different aspect or different component of the economics, and we need to see not just about the structural impact, of course, it's important, financial crisis, economic crisis, policy dimensions, very important. But look also, if you want to explain electoral behavior, if you want to explain how the citizens see this political, so in terms of potential support of these parties, you have to look not just about the material condition of the people, but also how they feel, also the moral vision of the society, and the value they share, because this is also can play an important role. And I think that's the idea also, not to just to separate artificially cultural and economics, because finally these aspects are connected each other, interconnected, and just that. So I hope it would be enough interesting for the discussion, and really happy to be here, and welcome for your question, remark, and criticism. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, Oscar, por una presentación que cubre todo. I'm going to speak in Spanish for
Of
the
course.
rest. Que cubre todo, cubre tanto la parte teórica como la parte empírica, con una conclusión además sugerente, que no estamos acostumbrados, que es que no hay que separar lo económico de lo cultural tan fácilmente como lo habíamos hecho, y además un punto de vista del votante que parece bastante interesante, incluso también sugerente, porque we are used to observe just the leadership of the people, of the leader that is proposing something that maybe is controversial, but we are not used to see how people react to those ideas. So it's very interesting. And I'm gonna open the floor to our students. We have a student of our master's degree here, and also we have academics for 3 institution of the faculties of the Universidad de Chile. We have our institution, the School of Government, but we have here behind you is Miguel, that is from the Instituto de Estudios Internacionales and Sociología. So we have here a lot of materia gris, as we say here. Yeah. So I open the floor for Jaime, then nuestro decano, and then Miguel. Jaime primero.
Jaime Aesa from the Department of Political Studies here at the Department of Government. Thank you so much for the presentation. It was very enlightening in terms of what entails your research, and also the evidence you provide according to your cases presented. However, I have a query regarding your case selection, because it seems to me that it's a bit homogeneous in terms of certain countries in Western Europe, and you use the logic of difference in the United States. However, I was querying myself about geographical differences, even cultural differences within their own European Union, because it seems to me that can enrich your own argument if you separate or you do some lagged variables regarding Eastern Europe, Southern Europe, and you take it as a different thing, because it can help also, in my humble view, to expand your argument worldwide. So my query regards to the idea of why this case selection specifically, but also how Eastern Europe, for instance, can have a different flavor in terms of what it means to be a producer, or what it means to be in the populist right wing. I'm thinking about Hungary, but also it could be Romania, Bulgaria, and also using this idea of the war in Ukraine, that it has also expanded beyond economics and cultural arguments. And Southern Europe, because of the Catholic issue. The probably Vox has a very different flavor to Front National, or whatever name it has now, of Marine Le Pen in France. And also because the Protestant argument in the United States can make some difference. I'm thinking about Jacksonian populism, this idea of nativism in an American way that is completely different to Europe. So how can case selection can expand your argument and also provide the greater insights that probably can also enhance and provide further evidence to your own purpose of what you want to study. That would be my query. Thank you.
Thank you.
So we take 3 and you answer.
Okay.
Leo?
Okay, so thank you very much. It was very interesting. Thank you very much. It was very interesting for me, your presentation. I sort of suspected many of the things you said, but I never saw them so well organized as you presented them. I wonder, though, the following thing is regarding this trade-off you presented between the cultural component and the economics part of these radical right-wing parties, which is referred to the fact that when you presented that survey you made, well, people considered that different groups of people, they were different groups. Well, this is very significant because according to the liberal view, which comes from the economics mainstream, if you want, people are all the same. So the extreme expression of that is that globalization implies that everybody is the same. So you live in the same world, people respond to incentives in the same way in South America as they do in Europe, and I think so. The sole acknowledgement that you have different groups means to me at least that this is a cultural thing. So this is a very cultural flavor. So it's not economics. It's a way of. So these leaders, in a way, by having this explicit acknowledgement that small businesses or small entrepreneurs, or if you want politicians or the rich or whoever you want, are different from the rest. It means that they're going farther away from the traditional liberals who think that everybody is the same, regardless of whether they come from another country, they have a different culture. Culture really doesn't matter very much in this in the modern economic view, to my view. It matters, but it matters in the understanding that there is an institutional framework which makes people different, but not because they are different from the very beginning, which is what these groups really think. This is what I feel. But I think it was extremely interesting for me, your presentation, so congratulations. Very good. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's a very interesting, not one paper, it's about 2 papers here and 3 papers.
Yes,
it's a lot of ideas on.
Maybe
It's more than one paper.
Yeah, it's definitely.
it is
It's several one. Yeah, it's very, very interesting. Sorry, I arrived late.
No
I have
worries.
some theoretical and more methodological questions. On the first one, is in your definition of economic populism, you introduced 3 characteristics. These are rather broad, big, all-inclusive maybe. So even, for example, I was thinking when I was saying that the people who support Brexit, they can be considered as economic populists as well, because they complete the 3 of your characteristic. But in this way, you are moving a little bit away from the traditional definition of populism. So why you don't, this is a typical comment I receive when I send an article to a review, is you are deviating from the mainstream. So why you don't try an alternative and put, for example, economic authoritarianism, for example, just like this? Because, well, if you already published this, is probably, you don't have this problem, but it's probably it is. Then, what is the second one? The idea of the producerism. You also introduced 3 characteristics of producerism, and this, I don't know if it's like Marxism and the division of them of the people, the workers, and the owner of the mean of production in general. You just change the name of the actors. Is have an inspiration in this or not? And third is It's so very interesting your analysis of structural equations, and this is a way to get just a sort of cluster. I didn't understand the graph that you present at the end. I don't know if you were just plotting there the coefficients or not, because you don't put the line over the zero. So with my friend Jaime here have problem to understand this. Yeah. And in the other paper, when you use factor analysis, you use exploratory. You have so good data there that you can use move to confirmative factor analysis immediately. Yeah. Why not, for example? That's it. Thank you.
Sorry? We have one question more. Maybe we're going to take that one and you answer 4.
It's a very short question comment which is related to both of these comments here and has to do with the producers, not the movie. Which is, in the different cases, it's really a question. In many of the cases that you provide, the United States, Germany, and others that I can think of that maybe you didn't look at, the characteristic of a producer can be very, very different. So one, it could be a worker, it could be agricultural producers, it could be the creative class. And yet, in almost every country, we see the same phenomenon, even though the types of production are very, very different. And maybe even the types of elites are very, very different. So in one case, it could be CEOs, but in another case, it could be some sort of, traditional aristocratic elite. But the reaction that we're seeing all over the world, including Chile and including Europe and so on, seems to be the same. I wonder if there's some sort of explanation for that.
Good luck.
So, thank you very much for your question, important questions. I think I cannot fix everything, I'm sorry. So, selection of case. We have no time here I have to be fast. And so we distinguish different countries in Europe because we started with the paper on 2020 there. And we have another paper, it's not included in the list, I'm sorry, it's paper published in 2019. And we started with countries where there were already strong radical right parties, as French, Italy, and we consider always also the case of US, of course, because Trump success. We start with some of these countries, and we UK also, and we introduce some alternative or control cases as Germany, because it was not the case of growing AfD at this period. But it's we try to consider first of all the Western Europe as not as homogeneous entity, but consider there are different strengths of these parties. Depending of the moment, depending of the tradition, the national tradition. So we started with that. Of course, there are some pragmatic choice, and we consider that the Eastern case or Central Eastern case were relevant, but we have limited money, and in order to do that, so we prefer have a big survey or a representative group of people. Then smaller, and then we enlarge countries. So we say, okay, we have money for 5-6 countries, and we try to have a North, UK, we have South, Italy, we have French, we have stronger, but also not so stronger radical right party. So it's a pragmatic, also because it was the first analysis from demand side perspective as a whole. Because look, so the 2024, the producers we try to submit for 3-4 journals, international journals, because they consider to not enough mainstream. It's strange because first we have we test this producers populist attitudes for the first time, because always the study was on the supply side, so on the vision of the producerism from politicians, so the parties, manifestos, etc. And the first time we test among citizens. And second, we compare US and Europe. We can, and this US and Europe usually are not compared directly. If you look at US scholarship, they say they do US, and then comparative politics is outside US. So they consider two separate legacy. And then of course, this is a bit not normal, but it's not my fault if Trump supporters are very close to in terms of characteristics, feeling of AfD supporters, of Front National supporters, and Fratelli d'Italia supporters. My fault. That's many studies confirm that. So we start because the empirical is much more important than the scholarship. So in this sense, there is this kind of choice. So about the economic and the cultural, I think that's a big issue. It's a big issue, and I think the attempt here is to connect from a theoretical point of view, but also the empirical point of view. And we recognize this choice is also normative to some extent, because we start from the idea that because we have a publication between for publication, so we observe that this part in the manifesto, in the discourse by the leaders, emphasize this producerist vision of society. And then they define some group as bad and the group as good. And then we started with this hypothesis. And of course, this, if you look, without that, you consider that, oh, it's not a liberal point of view because you distinguish already this different group, but why do you distinguish this group? Yeah, we distinguish this group because we studied before and we observed that this party already distinguished these groups. So, and yeah, that's the reason because we select this case, because we also try to select, we imagine other groups, intellectuals or whatever, many of the group potentially, but finally we start because of our studies before confirm or develop this hypothesis, and from the supply side point of view, from the discourse and the manifesto vision. And then populism, yes, of course, we have no time here to discuss about what populism is, but if we can start and then maybe we finish this night. But so, of course, populism are the different traditions of studies. Indeed here, we don't consider this populism as to be defined as a minimal definition or just a thin ideology. It's very problematic for many points of view. I published an article in 2019 just on that with my colleagues Carlos de la Torre is an important scholar on Latin America studies, and we observe that there is some problematic vision in this way. So it is a limited capacity from a heuristic point of view to capture some aspect. Look, I give you an example. If we have a minimal definition of populism, what you can deal with what happened during the COVID crisis. The COVID crisis defined the problem was not just the political elite undermining people's sovereignty. No, it's the medical power, scientific power. So there is a concept of epistemic populism. How you can deal with epistemic populism with a minimal definition? Just one of the million examples of that. Authoritarian populism, how you can put together authoritarian populism? So the point is you need to if you want to, in my opinion, to capture the reality, the complexity of reality, you have to define a concept in a way in relation to your research question. The concept of populism can vary depending on the context of the period of time. I know. And of course, in each studies, you have to define exactly what you have to use of that. And then here, the economic populism is just one way to define populism because it's the economic dimension of populism, because you emphasize this aspect of populism. And without the concept of, there is no, in a minimal definition of populism, cannot the word prosperity or well-being. But prosperity, well-being is a crucial point. How you can put this in some way? It's connected exactly on populism because you define the people around this concept. It's not separated, it's completely inside. In the epistemic populism, it's interesting because the problem is the truth. The question is, the people are the belonger of the truth, and there are the academic or the other, the expert, they are the parasite of the situation. They destroy the truth. And then, you can see if the truth is the problem. It's not about the general will. It's about the truth. So in this sense, we need a post-Lacanian vision. In this sense, it's an empty signifier, but without the normative point. I don't care about that, just from an analytical point of view. You have a different way to define people, different way to define bad elites and the enemies. And it's a very operational, it's a very useful in terms of from an analytical point of view. Of course, this is not about the leader first. So the leader is another way to define populism, but depends on your research question. My opinion is there is no populism as a general view in a general way. There is no a universal definition of populism. Of course, you can have a struggle in the society, in the media. They say, this is a populist, this is a populist guy, this is a populist leader, and for this reason is against democracy. That's it. It's not my role. My role is try to understand the phenomenon and not necessarily to judge if one is populist, another is not populist. Consider the fact that the minimum definition of populism is nothing to do with the fact that I define polemically someone as populist, because it's anti-democratic, because it's not legitimate, etc. So for me, I just delimited this definition. And I think it's not so large, it's not so vague. It's based on the idea that there are some definition of people, and the people. Why producerism? Producerism is, to respond to the, maybe I don't know if I can respond, but producerism there is a long tradition of studies, and there is the book by, the first book, no, it's, no, I go back, cannot go back. There is an important study of historians of ideas showing that the producerist antagonists start in the French Revolution. So the idea that the aristocrats, the monarchy, were the parasites, and then the third state was the expression of the producer of society. This started from that, so the French Revolution. Then you have plenty of reinterpretation over time, and you have a strong legacy. There is a strong legacy connected with, on the left, but also on the radical right and the fascism. And there are important studies connected fascism and producerism. So producerism is not a question, it's not a concept that you can put everywhere with different definition and then always the same. It's not a universal definition of producerism. It changes over time. In this sense, we need to test who are the producers today? In which context? In US, producers are, of course, that, but the parasite can be not necessarily the rich people. The rich people are much more in Europe case. So the question is, but this idea of antagonism with the producer and the parasite is part of the evolution of the economy, it's a part of the evolution of capitalism too, but it's not, I think it's not necessarily connected with Marxism at all. And there is I think a debate on that. I know not very well this literature, but the idea of exploitation is not the same. The exploitation of the capitalist against the proletariat is not the same. The capitalist is never seen as a parasite. It's never seen as a parasite. He's also an entrepreneur, invested in the West. You look at the manifesto of the Communist Party, is the idea that bourgeoisie is a strong modernity role actor, is not just a parasite of the society. It's never seen as that. So I think it's not about Marxism. It's about as a vision of a society where you can simply define two groups as the classic definition of the antagonism between the people and the elite. So in this sense, is based on the economic or cultural economic vision of society. And it captures some aspects, not everything, just to some extent, just And from methodological point of view, the debate can be also very, very long. And we can maybe check if it's possible. No. Look here, of course. So here is just exploratory principal component analysis. We register this, they save these the values, and we use that in the multivariate in multivariate analysis. So the objective is the goal was just to see how, to what extent, and if, of course, if and to what extent these kind of dimensions play a role in the. Of course, we should go more and try to develop more. It's not just the first attempt to do that. And of course, if here there are people interested to go further in this way, why not? And very welcome. No, I'm very welcome, because I think this kind of is not very conformistic. I know why we should be conformistic. I don't know, for mainstream. So, in terms of scholarship research, I have a many time discussion with my colleagues. But if you are not original, who care about your publication? That's just that. Sorry. If you repeat what the other say, why you should care about your publication? But of course, you can maybe some member of commission for permanent position, maybe, but not sure.
Muchas gracias. Estamos en la hora, pero podríamos ver si hay una o dos preguntas más por allá. Nuestros students. No, is that you have been problematic, because we have been studying concept and be very strong with concept, that you have to have a good concept, and you have saying now that concept has to be tied to the research question, so it's not that problematic that you don't have a strong concept. So
yeah, we can open this discussion, but another lecture maybe
about concepts.
About concepts, about Sartori, about Aristotelian tradition, about Wittgenstein. If you want, we can do.
No sé, hay más preguntas. ¿No? Pero lo de los conceptos los vamos a ver el próximo año de nuevo. Sí, preséntate.
Sí.
I'm Clemente. I'm a student of the masters. I saw in the references that you had a Pontusson quoted, and I was thinking, well, if we are taking not just the economy as the real process of production, but also taking into consideration the cultural factor in relation to that, how economic actors perceive the economy and how it works. I was thinking, taking into consideration that both of those streams are working in conjunction. Maybe an analysis of populism and the rise of populism and economic populism could be related to the literature on social blocs or growth coalitions, as they are being called now. Because there's, well, this body of literature says we have economic actors, economic groups, the certain groups of business sector, some political parties, and then we have certain sections of labor, of the laborers, of the workers, and they are what is the word? Connected in a certain way. They form a social bloc or a growth coalition between them. So, for example, you can have some scholars call it a bourgeois bloc between certain very powerful groups of business, some traditional right-wing parties, and certain sectors of the workers, such as more educated sectors of the working class. But to be conjoined, to be all together without many tensions, they need to have a certain ideology, as they call it, a group identity. If we take that and we look at how certain social blocs under opposition form, could we take that as a variable that could explain the rise of this economic populist attitude? I'm thinking, for example, in Germany, or other countries where economic populism, especially from the right, is rising. We would have on the one hand this bourgeois bloc, which has its cultural identity, but also is related, but also has actual economic material control over the shape of the economy. And on the other hand, you have the what is the word? The opposite, their rivals, which is the subordinated bloc of people, and they form a certain identity also, which might be, in one case, for example, the economic populist one. And the rise of a certain type of identity instead of the other could be explained by the work of the certain far-right parties in pushing their narrative instead of another. I was thinking that maybe that could be an avenue of research. Thanks.
Hi, how you doing? Jorge Valdebenito. I'm a sociologist and interdisciplinary study PhD. I really like to know, maybe it's not your focus, but I really like to know focus, your variable of analysis. But I really like to know your insight of the radical right parties and its dynamics, its fragmentation dynamics. Because in Chile, we now got 3 parties in that political space, and a few years ago were just 1. So I don't know if you observed that phenomenon there in Europe, maybe. Thank you very much.
Frequency, what do you...
Fragmentation dynamics.
Fragmentation, sorry.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, we're in here with these 2 questions.
So thank you very much for... So I think in Latin America there is an important tradition by Gino Germani in studying populism. And I think this is also a relevant point of view because you look at the social blocks of... This is the first way to analyze in the populism, so national populism in this sense, national populism. I think in the literature, of course, in Europe we really don't care about Gino Germani, but I think it's very relevant, should be relevant, to take in consideration the alliances between social groups. And I think there are also important interpretation of fascism in the 20th century connected with the analysis of the social blocks. So the fact that an alliance between bourgeoisie and working class was destroyed. There is an opposition between the conservative and the communists. The rising of fascism able to combine to create an alliance with the big economy of the countries, and so. And in this sense, I think this kind of vision of more structural vision. So based on social bloc alliances, it's complementary to this kind of analysis in terms of individual point of view. I think look at Germany today. Give you an example. Of course, I'm not a specialist in this kind of approach, but I respect this approach, and I think it's very relevant. You mentioned the distinction between identity and interest. This is also a way to look at this in this literature. Interest is a much more connected with material, and then identities, of course, as a matter of cultural identity, is a matter of social representation. You could also consider these two concepts. And look at the Eastern Germany. Eastern Germany is in the decline, is never developed after the reunification. And AfD, so Alternative für Deutschland, radical right parties, and now Sarah Wagenknecht on the left-wing anti-immigrant party, they grow in this region. Of course, because in terms of social blocks, it's irrelevant, because there is a bourgeoisie is very poor. Entrepreneurs are a few opportunities to develop. The economy is very poor, and the protest against the Western part is the main issue. Of course, they are to some extent occupied by West German after the reunification. And then there is no opportunity to develop. And this is kind of situation that create a strong alliances between different component of the society, from the teacher until everyone, because of course it is an opportunity, it's a kind of poor situation. And this is also relevant to some extent, because the idea is they consider themselves as a contributor to prosperity, because they contribute to destroy the communism to some extent. They open the opportunity to recreate Germany, but the Germany finally failed in the promise of a creation of a real unified Germany with all the same opportunity for all the people. And then this resentment. Is this resentment? And one of the concepts that I didn't use that, it's a resentment. The resentment against, of course, the people, they destroy our opportunity. And this sense is very relevant. So we contribute a lot, but never the promise were respected. And this creates a strong alliance. And this, I think, explains also the crisis of German mainstream parties, and also the possibility to have in February a new election, and then AfD is growing because Germany is in an economic crisis. So it's much easier to attack the mainstream social bloc of the Western part of people. There are many opportunities of the high middle class, and then you know, if you look at the analysis in this individual analysis, a strong educational cleavage. So the people they have no degree, there are less opportunity than the people with degree. In this sense, this kind of radical party is very strong in mobilizing people without a high level of education. And this one is the common aspect in US, in Europe, everywhere, at least in Europe and Western Europe, Eastern Europe too. In terms, this is another aspect. We should work also on this aspect too. Producer is one of the part of the story, but I think that one of the aspect also is the merit. So how the parties, the liberals and others, social democrat, define what is a good citizen with meritant citizen. Is the meritant citizen the people they pay taxes? Yes? No? First. Second, is a person that sacrifice for good education? Yes? No? Is a person that work hard everywhere, every day, 18 hours in an industrial sector? Yes? No? What's important? What's more important? What's the priority? That's also a crucial issue in our society, in terms of for political parties, because depending on that, you stay on the left, you stay on the right. Piketty, you can discuss about the limit of the book by Piketty, Capital and Ideology, but Piketty said, please, it's relatively easy. The radical right stay on the non-educated, and the left wing and the liberals stay on the educated. Look at the Trump success. Of course, there are more complex situation, but that's also a good point. And the idea that our workers, this vision of producerism, is an alternative view in respect the idea that the good people are first of all the people with degree. People, they study a lot, they're strong, they have achieved the opportunity to have a good job, they can travel, they know English, and the others, the left behind people, this argument is stronger for them, because the promises were not respected, and the enemies are the people. They're really parasite. They take the job just because they've studied. But studying, what cares? Studying is really important. No, the true people do not study anything. They work hard. That's it. So just it's a moral point and the ideological point, but I think it's very important. I discussed with the with politician colleagues in Europe, especially in Switzerland, because I'm based in Switzerland. I'm a Swiss citizen, so I asked me to be to have also advertisement for political parties, and they explain, well, why you can do, what can you deal with that? Just look, just that. Producer is not a matter just about from an analytical point of view. It's a real argument, because the mainstream parties everywhere, they say, okay, study a lot, have a sacrifice, but finally work in a fabric, in an industry is not really relevant. It's hard, but not you cannot really achieve a good salary, so it's not very relevant. And this message, it's stronger. And then you have left behind people. They have not the same opportunity because the globalization enhances inequalities. And of course, there are some people that are no opportunities, and they have a resentment, and they are very attracted by this argument of the radical right. So that's it. So I have no opportunities. So there are bad elites, and the people, they do not care about that. In this sense, you create a social bloc, because it's easier, because small business are not educated people. That's it. That's it. And about the fragmentation of the yes, it's I think in Europe we have a competition in many countries among radical right parties. Look at Italy. Italy is a very interesting case between Fratelli d'Italia and the La Lega. And this creates a good competition in terms of, because the observers, journalists say, oh, look, the crisis of the government is coming because they fight each other. But so this is a cooperative competition. There are a book by Albertazzi and others published in Routledge 2020-21. Trying to see how the competition in different European countries works, where you are more than one or two so-called populist party, and look at what happens there. And there are one of the possibilities, this kind of mix of competition and cooperation. Competition and cooperation is not alternative. It's the same as cultural and economics. Of course, there are some real competition and some real cooperation, but there are also something in between. And in the case of Italy, it's clear. So there is a kind of a fight for visibility, but the question is the survival of the government is the first priority for all of them. So the cooperation is based on the survival of the government. It's not based on the strength of electoral support. That's the point. It's not vote seeking, but they are much more policy seeking. So stay at the government. So it's implement policies. So that's another perspective. The priority of the party change, and in this sense, from Italy, the Fratelli d'Italia is probably will stay for 5 years in the government, and Meloni is a very clever politician, able to manage this kind of internal so-called fighting. But it's a matter of media stuff. It's a matter of kind of rhetoric, and of course it's part of the political game in Italy, where everything is politics, everything is at the same time is a show. It's a show, completely show. No, so it's a question of that. And then you have, so being the first prime minister coming from a fascist, neo-fascist or post-fascist tradition, staying in the government in Western Europe, the first Western European government, is much more important than everything. So being on the power, and they have also a long-term. That's another point. They have a long-term project, So they say they occupy the public broadcast, etc., etc. So they have the idea they won't change the society. And then 10% to 50%, the important is to have a majority as a whole, and in long term, to change society, change the vision of society, the values. So it's more, Meloni say, paying taxes. No, that's not a good way to do that. She explicitly say, paying taxes is not a good value. So that's, it's interesting that they like to change values. They change, is a real battle for changing society. So in this sense, you have not to look at these parties as just from a momentum point of view, but on the long term. Because they say they are minoritarian in society in terms of culture, in terms of because the globalization, etc. And they have a long run vision, the change of around, and they are not, they fail, but they are able to regain their position. Their rational is not the same as the mainstream parties, where you are politicians, they come, they go back, and then they resign. They never resign. They never look. Salvini never resigned. They never resign. So it's another vision of society. If they resign, of course, there are internal fighting, and then they cannot survive. But if they can, then they stay. And that's another challenge for mainstream parties, because they have a vision that sometimes the Schröder is disappear, or some other disappear, then Stolz disappear. They really have another vision of politics.
Bien, muchas gracias. Realmente ha sido muy interesante. Y en nombre del Departamento de Estudios Políticos de la Facultad de Gobierno, te damos las gracias por estar aquí, sacrificando tiempo con tu familia, y dedicándolo a nosotros, tanto a los académicos como a los estudiantes, para conocer un poco más de la realidad europea y de lo que está pasando en Europa, y ver las conexiones que tiene también con nuestros respectivos países. Agradezco también a nuestra institución copatrocinante, que es la Facultad de Ciencias Sociales, especialmente el Departamento de Estudios de Sociología, y a nuestro decano y vicedecano por estar presente. No se me puede olvidar, y el Fondo de Iniciación que dirijo y que patrocinó esta actividad también. Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much.